who fired that missile. Shepard?
Jennifer, thanks. John Bussey, they'll be able to determine that because they have so many different points to triangulate.
Yeah, they'll be able to determine that most likely, and Jennifer would know this better than I, to a specific zone. But whether or not it's going to be able to, they're going to be able to determine that it was this particular neighborhood where the separatists were operating or very close by where the Russian forces are, that's going to still be a little unclear. But we're at the beginning of this, the very early hours of the investigation. A lot more data is going to come in on this, and at some point we will likely know. Was it the separatists? Was it Russia? Was it Russia and the separatists ultimately claimed credit, seeking to divert blame away from the Russians who have been supporting them?
The first word of this came at 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time this morning. 11 a.m. we got word that the jet was down. It was just minutes later that we learned that the Ukrainian officials were sighting a Buk missile, surface-to-air missile, taking it down. At the time, we knew Russia had them. We weren't altogether sure whether these separatists have them. Fox News has now confirmed through many different sources and our own video evidence they do indeed have access to these missiles. And Jennifer Griffin, they've even posed next to them in recent days.
That's right. We have, in fact, we've found a deleted tweet from June 29th from the Donetsk Republic. That's the Twitter handle of the separatists, the Russian separatists operating in eastern Ukraine, and it shows very clearly those 4 missiles on the back of that mobile missile launcher known as a Buk. It's made in Russia. Also very significant to point out, Shepard, that the sanctions that were applied to 8 Russian defense firms yesterday by the White House, by the U.S. State Department, include a Russian defense contractor known as Almaz Ante, and they make surface-to-air missiles. So it is very clear that when the president stepped out at 5:45 p.m. Eastern yesterday and announced these sanctions against, among others, 8 different defense firms operating and supplying weapons that we're seeing start to appear in eastern Ukraine. It's clear that the Pentagon and the U.S. intel community have been tracking these kind of weapons and the flow of weapons
Russian officials was heading to Kuala Lumpur. It originated in Amsterdam. 295 people on board. It was a Boeing 777. 280 passengers and 15 crew members were said to be on board. And now the Ukrainian, an official from Ukraine's Interior Ministry, is saying that the plane was brought down by a ground-to-air missile. No more information right now as to the number of casualties or death, if there are any, but this is the information we have so far. 295 people on board a plane that crashed in Ukraine near the border with Russia. Joining us now on the line from Moscow is Pavel Felgenhauer. He's a military analyst. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. I know we have very little information so far, but from what you're hearing and also what the Ukrainian officials are saying, what do you think happened here?
Well, the plane was attacked. It was flying over a war zone, basically, where there's continuous fighting between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed rebels in the Donbass. There have been planes taken down and helicopters by the rebels before that, and recently there was a plane taken down. It was a transport plane, Antonov 26, which was flying rather high, which may mean that, at least that's what the Ukrainians said, that the rebels have acquired not only shoulder launch anti-aircraft missiles, but more serious missiles that can shoot down planes flying on high flight 6, maybe even 10. Apparently here it was 10 kilometers. Of course, I believe both sides, all sides in the conflict will say that they have no responsibility, and it would be rather hard to establish who actually shot the missile. Though maybe if there are NATO AWACS planes flying over Poland and Romania, maybe they saw something.
The Interior Ministry official that's being quoted by the Interfax news agency is saying that the plane was brought down by a bulk ground-to-air missile. Give us just an idea of how deadly a weapon this is, and would all the passengers and crew members on board this plane have died, do you think?
Well, it went down, most likely, yes, and actually already when it hit, most likely many were killed, because such missiles, they create a hail of shrapnel that kills a lot of people on board before it actually hits the ground. So survivors would be most likely impossible to find. This is if it was a book, maybe it was some kind of other missile. Right now, I believe it's too early to jump to conclusions, but these missiles can hit at planes flying at high altitude and at low altitude. These are regular missiles, radar guided. Maybe there was Ukrainian military air activity at the time, and if there was a crew firing that missile, they could actually make a mistake, and the missile self-guidance system could take on a bigger target. If the military target disappeared, it took on a civilian target. Such things basically happen sometimes.
Okay.
That's why planes should not fly over war zones. Of course, all sides will be denying responsibility.
Tell us, sorry to interrupt you, but tell us about this area where the plane supposedly crashed. I mean, this is an area where there's been intense military activity in recent weeks and recent months. Was it, if it was a dangerous area, would a civilian airliner be flying there? Why would a civilian airliner be allowed to fly into that airspace?
Well, apparently it was using pre-war air corridors. There up to recently, there was, of course, fighting there, and there were planes shot down, but these were low-flying planes and helicopters shot down by shoulder launch guided anti-aircraft missiles that can't hit anything higher than 3 kilometers, which puts civilian passenger planes flying at 10 kilometers or higher out of danger area. But if more serious, apparently more serious and more powerful missiles were introduced, this makes the area highly dangerous for civilian aircraft. That was most likely someone's serious mistake to allow the plane to fly over such a place. The rebels were using anti-aircraft missiles because they officially right now, up to now, don't have any air force, and the Ukrainian military, which was fighting the rebels, was using air force. So this indicates that this could be a rebel-held missile or missile operated by Russian volunteers or someone who maybe didn't have the right qualifications and didn't see in time that they have to abort their attack because they're taking on civilian aircraft.
I know it's very early right now, and I would be asking you to speculate if I ask you, whether this was an accident or deliberate, because we've heard accusations from both sides, both the Russians and the Ukrainians, accusing each other of downing aircraft in that area in recent days.
Well, I believe this was a mistake. Of course, there was a case some years ago when over the Black Sea, a Ukrainian missile, aircraft missile S-200, during exercises fired from Crimea, took down a Russian passenger plane flying to Moscow from Tel Aviv. And that was a mistake. So such mistakes have happened previously. I don't think that anyone wanted to deliberately shoot down the plane. It simply got in the wrong time and in the wrong place.
Wrong time in the wrong place. Let's just update our viewers who are just joining us on this breaking news story. Reports that a Malaysia Airlines plane has crashed on the border between Russia and Ukraine with 295 people on board. The plane had originated in Amsterdam and was heading to Kuala Lumpur. This is being reported by the Interfax news agency. Now, Russian officials at the Interior Ministry saying that the plane was downed by a ground-to-air missile. This is according again to the Interior Ministry in Ukraine, an official anyway from the Interior Ministry in Ukraine. And the same official says that he believes that all the passengers and crew members on board have been killed. We have no way of confirming this as of yet here on Al Jazeera, but just bringing you what we're hearing here from the Ukrainian officials. We have on the line with us right now Pavel Felgenhauer, who's a military expert, talking to us about the area where this crash is reported to have happened. And Pavel, as we've been saying, this is an area where there's been fighting in recent days, where there's been intense military activity in recent days.
Yes, of course, this is a war zone. Planes should not fly over war zones, especially since there's long-range anti-aircraft weapons being deployed there.
Okay, let's speak to Al Jazeera's Stephanie Scowen, who I believe is on the line now from Kuala Lumpur. Stephanie, what is the latest from Malaysia Airlines?
Well, Malaysian Airlines has confirmed it has lost contact with the plane. It lost contact over Ukraine. It is reporting that on its Twitter feed. So I think we can confirm that the plane is certainly missing. The circumstances of its disappearance, obviously still speculation at this time. But I know we have had some confirmation from Ukraine that the plane was shot down by some kind of surface-to-air missile on the Russian-Ukraine border. Who fired the missile, of course, at this stage, it's far too early to say. But obviously, it is a great tragedy. This is the second plane that Malaysian Airlines has lost in a matter of months. And obviously, the circumstances of the first plane's disappearance are still the search for that plane is still underway, and so the loss of this second plane is obviously a great tragedy for the airline.
A great tragedy indeed, and especially when you know that there were 295 people on board. No word yet, no official confirmation of deaths. But Stephanie, I know it's probably very late right now in Kuala Lumpur, midnight in Kuala Lumpur. No official reactions, I imagine.
No, other than the statement on the Twitter feed, we've had nothing more from the airline at this stage. But I certainly think, given their experience after the first plane went down in March, they will certainly be reacting far more quickly this time. And even though it is, as you say, midnight here, I think we can certainly expect something from the airline in the next few hours.
All right, at 16 GMT, you're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha with continuing coverage of this breaking news story. A Malaysian Airlines plane has crashed with 295 people on board. Here's what we know so far. The plane crashed in eastern Ukraine near the border with Russia. As I said, 295 people were on board. The Russian news agency
who fired that missile. Shepard?
Jennifer, thanks. John Bussey, they'll be able to determine that because they have so many different points to triangulate.
Yeah, they'll be able to determine that most likely, and Jennifer would know this better than I, to a specific zone. But whether or not it's going to be able to, they're going to be able to determine that it was this particular neighborhood where the separatists were operating or very close by where the Russian forces are, that's going to still be a little unclear. But we're at the beginning of this, the very early hours of the investigation. A lot more data is going to come in on this, and at some point we will likely know. Was it the separatists? Was it Russia? Was it Russia and the separatists ultimately claimed credit, seeking to divert blame away from the Russians who have been supporting them?
The first word of this came at 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time this morning. 11 a.m. we got word that the jet was down. It was just minutes later that we learned that the Ukrainian officials were sighting a Buk missile, surface-to-air missile, taking it down. At the time, we knew Russia had them. We weren't altogether sure whether these separatists have them. Fox News has now confirmed through many different sources and our own video evidence they do indeed have access to these missiles. And Jennifer Griffin, they've even posed next to them in recent days.
That's right. We have, in fact, we've found a deleted tweet from June 29th from the Donetsk Republic. That's the Twitter handle of the separatists, the Russian separatists operating in eastern Ukraine, and it shows very clearly those 4 missiles on the back of that mobile missile launcher known as a Buk. It's made in Russia. Also very significant to point out, Shepard, that the sanctions that were applied to 8 Russian defense firms yesterday by the White House, by the U.S. State Department, include a Russian defense contractor known as Almaz